So we'll start the meetup in like a few more minutes because a lot of people are still signing in. So I want to kind of give people a chance to, just introduce themselves. We always do that, at our regular meetups. And now that we are online, I feel like that was kind of missing. So, I want to give people a chance to just talk about who they are, network a little bit, just introduce yourself, where you're from, what's your name, what's your interest. If you're doing JavaScript, that's fine. If you're into other programming languages, that's totally cool too. We want to know about that. And then we hope to get out of this. And then at some point we'll, give it over to Yang. Yang, you're already a co-host, right? So you have the ability to share your screen and all that?
Looks like it, yeah.
Okay. All right. Why don't we start with you, Yang?
All right, awesome. So I'm Yang. I basically have been working in React for a while now, and just doing front end generally before that. But actually, I used to be a backend person. I used to work on distributed database systems and infrastructure, and I was doing that in industry and academia. But something about front end and building things that like touch users, that was my siren call. So ended up gravitating toward that over time. Yeah, just worked at a bunch of big companies and now small companies.
Excellent. All right, anybody else? Go ahead. Don't feel shy.
Hi, I'm Ed. Been an occasional drop in on the JSLA group, which is always fun to kind of see what's going on here. But as noted, I'm mostly an iOS developer these days. My JavaScript hacking dates back to the 90s, so it's a little old. But I'm always interested in new stuff, new tech. I like to do hackathons, and mostly I do contract work. So a lot of development projects on various companies and groups. Mostly mobile, a little bit of back end, occasionally some node work if necessary, but just like to keep my feet wet on everything.
Excellent. Anybody else?
Hey guys, I'm Herm. So I used to drop in quite a bit to the meetups a couple of years ago when I was kind of first starting off, but I've been kind of wanting to get back into it. I've been doing front end for about 2 or 3 years now, mostly working at startups all across LA. Quite like Ed, I know it's a small community of hackathoners, so I used to see them all the time at all the hackathons, and so yeah, kind of that's the experience. I'm actually trying to get my goal eventually is to get more into contract work, and so part of that kind of involves doing more of a holistic approach. So right now, taking the front end that I have, trying to learn more back end, and Yang's talk, I guess, React UIs kind of fits in with designing better UIs. So I'm really excited about that.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Okay, I'll go next. So my name's Omri. I currently work at a company called PennyMac, based in Westlake Village. I am technically a full stack engineer over there. Full stack is really my responsibility set. Where my team, at least, and other teams at PennyMac, we use Rails a lot, and I really like Ruby and I like Rails, but also JavaScript, and it's an inseparable part of working in everyday web applications, right? So there's actually a React application that I maintain at work. Before I was on my current team, I was on a team that was doing React Native, and we shipped our company's mobile app. So that was really cool. And this isn't like something I'm very proud of, but we are unfortunately stuck. Even though I maintain a React application, it's separate for most of our systems, which we're kind of stuck on XJS with. And if you guys know what XJS, I feel sorry for you. If you don't, then it's better you don't know what it is. So
Not bad, huh?
That's me.
Yeah, well, that's part of the job nowadays, like working with a lot of legacy stuff, and then innovating on top. I think that's actually the major request for most companies that are hiring. They want you to be able to jump in their back end or front end and then just make those changes. So
Right.
very important thing. I think, yeah, if you have that skill, more power to you, you'll do really well. So,
Thanks.
all right, next, anybody else?
I guess I can go. My name's Stanton, as you can see on the screen. I'm a relatively new engineer. I have like about a year of experience at this point. I'm currently looking for a new position since I don't super love the company I'm working at. But I would consider myself like a bit of a React specialist because not because like I'm better at React or anything, just because I like it more. Like I just really like how clean React is and how clean I can make my code. And I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I joined this meetup on Eventbrite. I think it was Eventbrite. And I just want to learn more stuff about JavaScript because I like it. So
Yeah, welcome.
yeah, so if anyone wants to connect with me, like I can like link to my LinkedIn or whatever. And if you want to collaborate on a project, I'd love to do that too. So, yep.
Definitely. Glad to have you from the Bay Area. Thank you. Yeah, it's awesome. Okay.
Hi everyone. My name's Robin. We sell mid-market accounting and enterprise software, and then we write custom add-ons around that software. And more recently, we've been using Node.js, React, and it's great. Love it. But I'm kind of a novice, and I dabble a little bit myself, but usually most often get programmers to help us.
Excellent. That's great.
Yeah.
All right. We have next speaker, our next person. We'll start around 7:15, just so you know, like for everybody.
I guess I could go. Hi everyone, my name is Frank. This is my first time being part of this JavaScript meetup. I just graduated from a boot camp last month, and so yeah, I'm interested in React. Trying to expand my knowledge. What was that? Sorry?
Which boot camp?
Learning Fuse in Irvine. I don't know if you heard of that one.
So did you do it remote?
What was that? Sorry.
Was it all remote?
Yeah. So when I was attending, like COVID was like rising, it was like, becoming a thing. And then, they were debating every day, like, oh, do we need to go remote? Do we need to go remote? Then around, I think it was March. That's when they told us like halfway through the cohort, they're like, sorry, we have to go remote now.
Oh,
so like 5 weeks in, it's like, okay, now remote time. So yeah.
That's pretty rough, man. I'm actually a bootcamp grad myself, so I feel you. I graduated from App Academy, I want to say 8 months ago now, so I know how it feels.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, I just graduated from the boot camp, and my interest is in React. I want to learn more about like React routers, React hooks, and things like that. And so right now, I'm just working on my portfolio and just trying to get a job in this market.
Definitely. Before the next person goes, I just wanted to ask everybody here, do you all know about our Discord channel?
No.
No? Okay. Let me just
can you send a link? I would love it. I use Discord so much. I use Discord for work too.
Okay, no problem. So I'm gonna screen share. Just give me a second here. And
Just want to paste the link in chat, maybe?
yeah. Well, actually, yeah, I'll have to do that because otherwise I'll have to cancel this thing. So hang on, I'll put it in the chat. So first off, there's our website, right? So it's JavaScriptLA.net. I just want to make sure you guys know about that. Here's the website so that you can get there. It's in the chat. And if you go to this website, right, like you can basically see like info about all of our meetups. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see chat with us on Discord, as well as chat with us on Slack. So if you got a second, just make sure you can get to the website and then make sure you can get into the Discord or Slack. I prefer Discord just because Discord allows me to make multiple channels and I don't have to invite everybody again to a new channel. I think Slack kind of makes it a little hard for people to get notifications. So that's why I'm on Discord more. But that said, we're all networking here and talking about things we're doing, you know, and I think that's really great. Like we do that every meetup, but I also want people to be able to do that after meetups, right? Like it's really weird. Like everybody's like really passionate about doing something, but then like it kind of drops off because until the next month. So, you know, like it'd be nice if people wanted to like talk after the meetup and just kind of like continue to help each other out because we all have the same goals, sort of, you know, do better, find work, make more money, all of that. So it's really necessary.
Is this the JavaScript Ninja channel?
So that's our Instagram name, but if you go to the website, it's just JavaScriptLA everywhere else. So
if you pasted it into the chat,
yeah,
it can go up to everyone.
I
If you
just
sent
did.
it,
I don't see it.
it didn't go to everyone.
No, it didn't come through.
Okay, just give me a second here.
I think you have to say to everyone.
Yep.
Okay, Herm just posted it to everybody too. Does everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know why like mine didn't go through, but I'll see. Can everybody see this? All right.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's the website, JavaScriptLA. It's all spelled out because if you put JSLA, first off, that's a different group altogether. But like ours is JavaScriptLA, like spelled out, just so people know that. Some people make that mistake quite often. And then you can do like a Google search or DuckDuckGo search, whatever. If you type JavaScriptLA, you'll find us. But that's the website, and then the Discord link is on that web page. So I'll give everybody like a couple seconds to look at it. If you have any questions, let me know. But that's it. We're almost, oh, it is 7:15. So we'll do like a last call for like networking, and then afterwards we can do that at the end. Because I do want to hand to Yang.
Great.
Okay, so Yang, I'm gonna hand it over to you anyway. I think like go ahead and get started, and then afterwards we can do like a chat at the end if anybody has questions.
Perfect. Cool. I'm gonna share my screen.
Perfect. And then while Yang is presenting, I do ask everybody, I know people know this, but I have to say it, please mute yourself if you're not the speaker, because we don't want interruptions for the main meetup.
Oh, actually, are you able to add the other? There's two of me in the Zoom. Are you
Yeah.
the other one?
Yeah, I'll find the other one and then I'll add you as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Does that come through?
Yeah.
Great. Cool. So thanks everyone for joining and just listening today. So like I mentioned, I'm Yang. I'm an engineer who is working with a very small team on a project called Plasmic. And so I'm excited to be here and share a little bit about this project. It really started a while back, and I'm hoping that it can be useful to all React developers just as a developer tool. But also I thought it was interesting to share as a React project in itself. It's definitely been a bottomless well of challenges, both technical and otherwise. So, whoops, whoa, what the heck is, you guys can still see my screen? Okay, great. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the high level before actually diving into the tool. And then after diving into the tool, I wanted to just pop back up and talk about kind of what went into making the tool. So the high level, what is Plasmic? It's basically a new visual UI builder, currently focused on React, and wanted to solve two different problems with it. So the first problem that we want to solve is basically from our experience working on product teams for a long time in big companies, small companies, building lots of front ends and React apps, and working with designers. on these product teams today, I'm actually curious, maybe before going forward, I don't know if there's a way to poll the audience in Zoom, but how many people here work with a designer? Maybe just like mention in chat or I'm just curious like what the percentage is.
When you say
the question is, who works with a designer?
Does that include like does that go beyond just getting like the wireframes?
No, like receiving wireframes, I would count that actually. Yeah, and maybe like basically some nebulous entity is handing you some some wireframes.
I guess I wouldn't know like what to build without it. So yeah.
yeah, definitely. Cool. Okay. So I think a few people. Great. I'm always super curious. Yeah, most of my own experience has been like without, you know, I've built a lot of front ends without working with a designer, but when I do get to work with a designer, it's great. So you know, the first problem is that basically collaborating between design and engineering can be complex and time consuming. So you know, designers, they're spending all this time creating these very high fidelity vector drawings, right? And these drawing tools like Sketch and Figma, if you're familiar with those. And then they hand these off to engineers who basically have to recreate these UIs from scratch by hand using code. Inevitably, there's a lot of things that get missed in this translation because it turns out that we as developers generally really suck at this, or are just hard to translate because designs are such freeform drawings, right? So this leads to a lot of back and forth with design, and ultimately you have these two sources of truth that are, by a lot of teams' admission, like never truly in sync. So we wanted to really streamline that collaboration and that translation process. The second reason, what is going on? So the second reason for working on this was wanting just selfishly to give ourselves a better and kind of rethought development experience for building UIs. And so this is, you know, so we can build a lot faster, but at the same time eliminate an entire class of visual bugs and QA and related tooling. And you know, if you spend a lot of time using things like the Chrome DevTools CSS inspector, or you know, you spend time like kind of guessing and checking what flex spaces to use and waiting for your hot reload cycle and stuff like that, and you know, trying to restore your state, you kind of know what I'm talking about. So trying to give a different developer experience that is faster and dare I say, you know, maybe even fun to play with. So you know, UI builders are not new. They're actually you know, they've been in use for a long time, actually, especially more so on other platforms like iOS and Android and Windows than the web. We haven't really seen it anything like that for the web. But yeah, they've been used for building all sorts of major apps for a long time, and so we wanted to kind of bring some of that to the web. So anyway, Plasmic is a visual UI builder to let developers. We're focused on developers right now, but we're also trying to keep it accessible to designers. But letting developers or possibly designers craft complex sort of presentational components that integrate into your code base. And from there, you can, you know, actually attach the real props, event handlers, data, et cetera. And the idea is to really let you move a lot faster and fix, you know, design development collaboration. So anyway, that was a lot of words to kind of set the stage for Plasmic and, you know, what it is, why it is. And then I'm going to switch gears right now into a demo. So this is the tool. And for this demo, I'm actually just going to dive into creating this new project. And I'm going to be creating basically to do MVC, everyone's favorite sort of example app that there exists a lot of references for. So this is what it looks like just as a refresher. And I'm not going to actually create the whole thing. I'm just going to create a small subset of it. But basically, the flow that we're trying to enable in Plasmic is, you know, you can start from scratch, and so this is one way to start. We're actually also focused on letting you start from like designs from Figma and Sketch, and being able to import those. And maybe I can show that later. But basically, just giving you this canvas that where you can kind of freeform very roughly, with messy absolute positioning and everything, just slap things onto the screen, and then from there refine it into something that is real and robust, and you would actually not be ashamed to ship into production. And so what I mean by that is, like, let's say I'm just gonna add some text for the title up here. I'm gonna make it huge, make it thin, give it this slight red color, and right under it, I'm just gonna draw a box for the actual task itself. So I'm gonna set the background of the whole page to be this sort of off-white, warm gray, maybe something lighter. So this is kind of the flow that we want to enable, is just like really rapid, feedback loop and iteration on these things. So I'm drawing this box for the circular text box checkbox that I want to put onto the screen. I'm going to remove that background, add a very light fill color, and right next to it, I'm going to add some text for the actual task itself. And so this is kind of my rough task card, what it might look like. And I was talking about just letting you get ideas onto the screen, and then worry about refining it, making it more quote unquote real progressively as you go, and giving you the tools to do that in a natural way. So right now I have this kind of mock that I'm just like kind of whipping up to get a feel for what this app should look like ultimately. But I want, of course, more than one task in my to-do app, my task manager. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create a component out of this, and I'll call it task. And now I can just like basically instantiate a bunch of these. And these are, just roughly arranged vertically. And what I can do is I'm going to lasso them into a vertical stack. And what these stacks do is they kind of keep everything distributed in line always. And these are basically powered by Flexbox, but we've spent a lot of time actually trying to distill it down into a set of controls that are really streamlined and kind of more intuitive, and giving you extra like features on top. So just to show you exactly what I mean, I'm gonna clear this background color first. I'm gonna align everything to the top, to the left. I can double click an edge to auto size to the content vertically. I can also do content sizing horizontally. These are some of the simple features. I'll show some more interesting layout features in a little bit, but I'm gonna name this element so I can keep my elements in my component organized, and also this will come in handy later during the actual code gen. So, so this is my list of tasks. Now, the thing about these tasks is they're kind of boring right now. They're all saying the same thing. I want them to be different text, right? In fact, I want the text to be variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click into this component to start editing this component. And there's just a single copy of this component that I'm editing globally, right? Like when I make changes to it, all the instances are reflecting that change. And I can select this text, and I'm just going to, for this demo, I'm just going to convert it into a slot. So slots are basically, you can think of it as like children props, right, into a component. And so what that means is it's like I'm poking a hole in the component so that from any one of these instances, I can pass in any sort of content that I want to fill it up with. So for instance, a simple thing I can do is just like change the text, make to-do app, show a demo, but you can really fill it up with anything you want. Now, the only other thing I want to do with these components is I want to design them in a bunch of different states, right? Because this is just like the bread and butter of how components work in React. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to first right-click this component to pop it out into its own artboard. So I have a separate, basically artboards are views of things that, and you can create as many different views of a component that you want. If you're familiar with like React Storybook, it's the same general philosophy of letting you kind of work on things in isolation. And basically for representing different states, Plasmic has this concept of variants that I'm going to show here. So I'm going to create a few different variants for this task component. Maybe one state is like the completed state. Another state is the editing state. Another state is the state where it's marked high priority. And I can make all these look different. But for this demo, I'm just going to design out the completed state. And maybe for that, all I want is for there to be a checkbox in the check mark in the checkbox. Sorry. So for that, I actually like the look of this check mark from the reference app. And by the way, I'm just kind of flying through this because I also want to get to the part about, you know, talking about the code side of things. And so I'm just flying through this, but definitely, you know, feel free to interrupt me with questions or if something I'm saying doesn't really make sense. So anyway, I added this check mark in there, and basically I can now switch between my base appearance and my completed appearance to kind of see the difference. And so what's going on is basically when I was making changes and directly manipulating things in this completed state, all the changes are being recorded as deltas, as overrides on top of the base appearance. Kind of similar to, you know, how you might represent things in code. It's not like you're making a hard copy of the component and then, you know, making it look different in all these different states. So actually, just to show you, I can also create a different artboard, another view of this task, arrange it side by side, and make it show the normal base appearance of the component, so I can see the two side by side. Now, for the completed state, maybe another change that I want is for the text to be strikeout and to be a lighter color as well. So maybe I can save this actually as a reusable text color, like disabled text color or something like that. Right? You can, there's a lot of these abstractions that you can kind of use throughout the app, like tokens and mixins and whatnot. So that is basically, you know, what I want my completed state to look like. Now, the thing about these variants is that you can combine multiple of them, just like, you know, you might expect in a real app. So for instance, let's say I wanted to add a hover state to this thing. So I'm gonna add a hover state. And maybe whenever I hover over any part of this component, I want this circle to become darker. So I'm just gonna go ahead and directly make it darker. So that again is recorded as an override, a difference on top of the base appearance. And so if I now am, you know, if I actually want to try out what this looks like or what this feels like, these simple interactions like hover, etc., I can just switch into live preview mode and play with it here. Okay, so it's close to what I want, but I realized from playing with it that another thing I want is for the pointer to change to a hand pointer. So I can go ahead and make that change as well, like so, and switch back. And okay, so that's better. That's more what I want. So yeah, anyway, these are just how you can model these different states. And again, you're not making a copy of the component. It's like any change that you make to the base appearance are still going to bleed through to all the different variants that we just created, right? Like if I'm moving this check mark around, for instance, it's still affecting where that thing is in the completed state. So these variants, they actually come bundled with the component anywhere it goes. So back in my main screen, the way I want to set up this mock, I can, you know, take any one of these instances and maybe set that in a completed state, and I can also play the whole thing, and so kind of interact with it like this. And so that, you know, it's a little subtle, but you can notice we're kind of dynamically combining the completed state and the hover state here in the middle one. So anyway, that was pretty much it for this simple app that I wanted to create in like 5 minutes. And so I wanted to maybe actually just the one last thing I'll do is tighten up the layout, because right now, you know, like I mentioned, everything's absolute positioned. So I can just like turn on real layout, arrange everything into a column, center things, and maybe add a little bit of padding to the top and bottom, so it looks nicer. And you know, if I'm resizing, you can see you can also like design things responsibly. Like for instance, if I'm going to call this whole thing to do app. Now I'm going to duplicate this artboard. So I have two of these, and I can arrange them sort of side by side. And I can, you know, maybe make one of them really narrow and one of them wider. And so you're kind of simultaneously designing on different form factors, etc. So anyway, that was pretty much it for this, for crafting this app. And now's the interesting part, which is how do I go from this design to actual, you know, code? So the idea here is basically if I am, well, one simple way you can play with things is Plasmic has this code sandbox integration. So you can pretty quickly just like spin up a code sandbox and see your, you know, everything you've crafted kind of running as a standalone web app in a real React app just from your browser. And it's like a really convenient way actually to prototype things and whatnot. So yeah, you can see we have the full sort of pixel perfect design in a React app here. Now, another thing, much more interesting is actually getting this into like a quote unquote real code base. So your local code base, et cetera. And for that, we actually provide this client that you can install, already have it installed. And from there, you can just run these two commands. So the first one is Plasmic init, and that's just something you would run to get started using Plasmic in a code base. So I'm gonna, whoops, Plasmic init, and I'm gonna go with all the defaults here. And then finally, the next command is Plasmic sync. So I'm gonna copy that, and I'm just gonna sync it down. And what that does is it'll pull down the sort of two components that we created. And it pulls them down actually as, you can basically think of it as an NPM library. It's like, we give you these dumb presentational components that don't really have any real logic or behavior in them, aside from like simple things like hover. And then, you can, wire it up to your own real state management framework, your own data sources, your own, routing framework, whatever it is. So we don't like impose anything in that regard. So I have, so this, by the way, this project that I've been syncing things down into, like, what is this? This is just a blank React app. So I have this, blank React app here. That's what I've been syncing things down into. And then I can pull up actually the app running on the right and the code on the left. So I'm gonna replace all this boilerplate, create React app stuff with the spinning logo and everything with just rendering the to-do app that we just created, just get it onto the screen. So that's really all it takes. And then, you have it running. And from there, the interesting part is, of course, wiring it up to your own real behavior. So for that, I'm gonna click into it. And so this is basically what the to-do app component looks like. This is just a very thin shell that we get you started with. And all this is doing is wrapping the Plasmic to-do app component. And this is that dumb presentational component that I was talking about that comes from a library. And so this one, you can wire up, you can attach whatever props you want to any element you want inside of that component. So just as a simple example, let's say we wanted to get our real data reflected in this app. So for instance, let's say your real data came from some state here that I'm just gonna define like so. But this can, of course, come from anywhere. And let's say I have these 4 tasks in here. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna, if you guys remember, I created that task list element earlier. I'm just gonna refer to that by name and replace all of its contents with this list of tasks that I'm gonna render using the other component that we synced down, the task component. Like so. And save, and that gets us the actual tasks we care about onto the screen. So anyway, this is just how you can quickly kind of get running with the components. And the thing that is I think a little bit interesting about the workflow that we're trying to enable is that we don't want this to just be like a one-time eject where you create the design and you eject into the code and then you can modify the code however you want. We want to enable this continuous ability to sync the code over. So what I mean by that is I'm going to start this one mode of Plasmic, which is called Plasmic Watch. And what this does is it live streams the edits that you make in the studio into the code base. So I'm going to have the running React app on the right and the studio on the left. So you can kind of see things side by side. But let's say I wanted to make some like violent changes to the layout of this thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this thing, instead of this vertical list of thin tasks, I'm going to make it look like a set of tiles. So I'm going to make this look boxier so it looks more like a tile. And I'm going to turn on like real layout here. And I'm going to give it some padding, maybe 8 pixels of padding. And I'm going to take this checkbox and pop it out, make it free floating, and kind of move it to the bottom right. I'll anchor it to the right and to the bottom of the container. I'm also going to set everything to be top aligned. And so that's basically my new tile look for the task. Now I still have a vertical list of these, which doesn't look great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this whole task list container and I'm going to set it to be row layout instead. Now everything is kind of flowing off the side of the screen because our screen isn't necessarily wide enough. So I'm going to turn on wrapping. So now everything wraps around, that's nicer. But I can't really tell the difference between the different tasks. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn on row gap and column gap. So these are, you can see some of the more interesting features of the layout system that we have here. And you can try and implement things like gaps today using various CSS selector hacks, and then you deal with the specificity repercussions of that as you go. But just trying to give you something a lot more streamlined and intuitive here. So anyway, yeah, so that is kind of our the workflow that we wanted to enable for this, just giving you like very visceral, like immediate, zero hot reload kind of feedback to tweaking presentational things, the kind of stuff that you might spend a bunch of time doing in the CSS inspector, et cetera. So yeah, that is a really quick whirlwind tour of what Plasmic is. So I want to switch gears back into the slides here. So I thought it would be interesting to share some of the challenges that went into building this thing. So some of the technical challenges were, worrying a lot about state management and keeping things snappy. And by that I mean really latency is the main metric by which we're kind of evaluating shows on performance. And the thing there is like, if you have operations like these drag operations that are you want to be smooth, then usually you have kind of a frame rate that you want to hit, and therefore a frame budget of like maybe 16 milliseconds that you you just want to try as much as possible to not bust that budget and try to keep but that means in terms of the state management working backwards is that you have to find ways to do only the bare minimum of what you need to do, especially when you have these complex expensive operations like layout reflows and other things that you're triggering. You only want to update basically the bare minimum of what you need to keep things feeling responsive, and then kind of defer as much as possible of the work of updating everything throughout your arena into these incremental bite-sized chunks, and keeping them as incremental as possible so that you're only updating really what you need to, instead of like re-rendering the whole artboard, just re-rendering the parts of the artboard that you need to, for instance. And scalability, by this I mean like this arena here, I had like just these 4 artboards, fairly manageable. But if you have an arena of like 100 artboards, then how do you keep things responsive in that case? And again, the answer is really just about breaking up work into as many small incremental chunks as you can, and lazily propagating those changes throughout your artboards. Maybe you only want to focus on updating immediately the artboard that you have in focus at the given moment, and then kind of deferring the rest of the work to and prioritizing that based on whether it's even in view or not, right? Some other technical challenges are we have this like I showed you this live preview mode, right? What this is actually doing is it's doing the full round trip of doing the code gen and then reflecting that back into you in the browser. And so this actually requires us to do dynamic module loading. So we're actually generating this code, transpiling it using your standard transpilation tools, Babel, etc., and loading that back into those modules back into your this app dynamically. Yeah, just making that work is a bunch of work. Yeah. There are some product challenges, a lot of product challenges, but one is, I kind of mentioned this at the start, but layout is just such a cross-cutting concern all the time that just making it really fast and intuitive and streamlined is something that we've spent a long time doing. So if you think about what's a good example? I mean, I think CSS layout has a bit of a reputation for like if you just want to get to text divs, right, to horizontally stretch to fill the available space that's given to them. You might try setting flex 1 on them. You may or may not be surprised at the result. like there's always an explanation, right? Like flex as a setting is, it multiplies the flex basis. And for, if you have a container that's flex direction row, that flex basis defaults to the width of the elements, and width defaults to auto, which in this case means the max content size. And so what that means is that these two text divs are growing at different speeds. And you may or may not find this at development time versus production. And so anyway, there's a bunch of these like, I think scars that people develop around CSS layout. And so, when most of the time you really just want like, I just want things to stretch or to wrap or to be fixed size or, some percentage, right? Like that's probably like 99% of what you want to do. And then, obviously things like flex gap, other things that we constantly reach for, but don't yet have in a sort of nicely packaged cross-browser way. So those are some of the making layout intuitive challenges. Another set of challenges is mapping concepts from design tools like Figma or Sketch into our own representation. And this is what I was alluding to at the start, which is I kind of showed you this workflow of creating everything from scratch. But we also have this kind of, Figma plugin where you can basically select a bunch of artboards and kind of export them and then import them into Plasmic. And we do all that translation at the low level of, basically SVG to CSS DOM, right? And there's just a ton of like headache-inducing little things that you have to think about, like, okay, how do you deal with centered borders, right? You have inner shadows and outer shadows in CSS. Like, how do you deal with centered borders? How do you deal with like just like the gradients and the representation of gradients in like these other tools? And so anyway, there's a lot of like that grunge work that we just completely automate. And from there, the next step is really how do you get from a bunch of these like random divs and random overridden components into things that are like proper hygienic React components that have like, state that you would be, that you would consider clean from a development perspective, right? And so basically that's the other part of our sort of Figma import tooling, is giving you refactoring tools to, coalesce basically. Like for instance, you in Figma, you have a bunch of these button components, and how do you coalesce them into like different states of the same component? So things like that. But I think our most interesting sort of key challenge is really around the code integration. And if you think about like what is natural for visual direct manipulation and what's natural for expressing in code, we wanted to try and marry the best of both worlds and find kind of the most natural and flexible interface for doing so. The goal really is to take away the burden of keeping this code in sync with the design, and at the same time wanting to give you complete freedom to build and structure the component code as you see fit. And this flexibility is both for practical, like necessary reasons. Like at the end of the day, you just need to wire things up to your real data or your real event handlers, right? But also aesthetic reasons. You just want to have control over your component prop interface, right? You want your prop interface to be talking about things in terms of like your own domain data structures and things like that. So our thinking is always rooted in like giving you as much of this kind of flexibility as possible. And so what that boils down to is these two code gen schemes that we have today. And you can kind of choose, which one suits your tastes. But the first is what I kind of already showed you. We just give you this library of dumb presentational components, and you pull them into your code base and you render them however you want, right? Like I have this to-do app component, and it's just rendering this presentational component, this Plasmic to-do app. And same thing with the task component, it's just a thin wrapper around the Plasmic task. And the idea really is, you own the to-do app component, you own the task component. And then the Plasmic task and the Plasmic to-do app, these are components that are, the presentational components are managed by Plasmic, and these are what are basically regenerated for you as you're making changes in the studio. So the idea is like, with the components that, like the to-do app component that you own, you can do whatever you want with this file. You can change it to a class-based component. You can like delete this file. We don't really care. So therefore you can add whatever state and logic and behavior you want to it. So there's this very clear line in the sand around what you own and what is managed for you in Plasmic, at least until you decide to eject, if you ever want to do that. The other sort of scheme that we have is the direct edit scheme. So this is actually pretty fun to show, but the philosophy here is that is to give you maybe this is more appropriate for like very complex components, but basically give you access to the raw JSX tree so that you can directly edit that file as if you had written that JSX tree yourself. And so I'm going to show you this as a quick example here. Like back to my project, I'm going to reconfigure this thing to the to go from this black box scheme to the direct edit scheme. So I'm going to make this change, and I'm going to restart this Plasmic Watch. Oops, actually, I'm going to first wipe away my own local changes to these files, and so you'll see this transform. Okay, so now you have this raw sort of JSX tree that you are able to directly manipulate and work with. So for instance, I'm gonna, maybe I want to wrap this title in some div or some other, wrapper component, or I want to add some component here at the end, and maybe in the wrapper component, in the title, I want to add some more props, or whatever it is that you want to do. You can make all these changes, and I'm going to turn on Plasmic Watch again. And so now I'm going to have my code on the right and my studio on the left. And as I make changes to this component, like let's say I change the title to be more enthusiastic, and I change the I had like some kind of div here at the bottom, or you can see these changes getting reflected in the right. And so what's going on is we are, you can think of it as we're constantly rebasing your developer edits on top of the latest presentational code. And so this is similar to, a line-based rebase you might expect from something like Git, but we have more awareness of JSX syntax, so we can do something smarter. And anyway, so yeah, that is pretty much it for the code gen schemes. I thought that was the most interesting part of this. And so in terms of like the ultimate impact on our workflow that we see, the first is that this focus on the really thinking about what kind of product you're building toward, sort of this end state is what I call this design first mentality. It forces you to think about like the end goal and the product and the experience, and to then fill in the logic in service to that. And this, you can contrast this with kind of a bottom-up approach, which can be helpful sometimes, but it can also be, kind of just like bumbling until you kind of build something that is right. And may lead you down some paths that you didn't intend to necessarily go. I think the second thing I want to call out is basically if you are lucky enough to work with the designer, especially one who is a little technical, and you can collaborate with them, then I think that's really awesome. I feel like that's really the most magical thing is like you just running Plasmic Sync, and each time you run Plasmic Sync, like a nicer version of your landing page appears in your code base. And so it's just because like all that work is already done for you. And so yeah, there's something pretty awesome about that. It's a new kind of workflow with designers that I haven't really seen before, and so I want to definitely explore this more. And then the last thing is just taking a lot of off your plate in terms of like visual regression tests and manual QAing, and like if you set up storybooks that kind of line up your implementations with your Figma designs, etc. Like trying to sidestep a lot of that. This is the last thing is just, I think this is the most fun part of this project for me, is really seeing people, you know, what they are building with Plasmic. And, you know, these are some examples, like, you know, apps running on embedded sensors, legal document workflow apps, mobile delivery apps, and a bunch of like websites. And of course, Plasmic itself is also, large parts of it are built in Plasmic. So let me just give you a quick peek at you know, our own project called Plasmic Kit. And this basically has, yeah, so you know, you can see like various things are built in it. We've got our you know, error messages, our activity feed, our publish dialog. Let's see, our settings page here, our multitude of different flavors of buttons, which really kind of highlights, you know, buttons are always like a great stress case for variance. Text boxes, our basic toggles, and our share dialog. So, you know, this is just, if I click share, this is the dialog that's showing up here. Our code sandbox dialog, so that's saying here. Yeah, our drop downs, our new left pane that's coming in, our many icons, and lastly our kind of dashboard here, which is the main screen. That, you know, if I go back to the main screen, did I? Oh, here it is. Yeah. So yeah, just that. Yeah. So I think that was pretty much what I wanted to cover. Yeah. Thank you for listening. I'd love to take questions and just talk about this forever. But yeah. Anyway, I've opened up registration, so definitely anyone here is welcome to sign up and play with it. We'd love to get your feedback. It's still, you know, really early days for us, but yeah, just thank you.
All right, round of applause, either in chat or if you want to unmute yourself and clap, that's fine. All right, yeah, really excellent demo. It's actually pretty amazing that you're able to do all of that within the browser. So I'll ask you some questions at the end, but I think we had a few questions from our group. The first one, it says, I think this is Untitled tab. It says, it looks like Figma. Is that correct?
Sorry, where is this? Is this toward the top?
728.
728. Okay, thank you. Great. Yeah, I mean, I kind of mentioned at the start, we're actually trying to look loosely like a design tool, like Sketch or Figma, so that, you know, our goal actually is to kind of give developers a similar feeling of speed and that same sense of, I guess, speedy iteration that you get from a design tool, and like the ability to just like start, you know, with very rough, absolutely positioned things, etc. So yeah, definitely wanted to give you something familiar, but at the same time, you know, like there's a lot of differences. I mean, yeah, we can. That's more getting into the weeds.
All right. The next question is, does Plasmic target only React? Can I use it with another JS framework?
Right now, we're just focused on React. When this project was started, we actually were initially focused on Vue. That's kind of the first framework that we targeted, but we decided to actually just focus on React first and start there. And I think you know, certainly other web frameworks are you know, very well within reach for us. Vue actually is a lot simpler in a lot of ways to work with, just because of its whole like template paradigm. But yeah.
Okay. The next one is, does Plasmic pick up any changes, style or otherwise, back from the code?
No, so this is like React itself. This is one-way sync. So this was a deliberate decision to not have production concerns basically bleed back into your visual assets and your presentational layer. And the idea is, like you're gonna wrap these components and elements and all sorts of things that are very specific to your domain or very tied to your infrastructure. And these are not things that we want to necessarily like root back. Yeah.
Just want to real quick interject. If anybody has their mic on, can you please reduce the noise until like it's your time for the question? Thank you.
But so not trying to sync things back into the studio, but you can definitely like override anything you want, and wrap anything, replace entire chunks of the designs with your own your own components, etc.
So how does that not get blown away then? So I guess you have the components that you built with the studio.
Yeah.
And then you start using it, and then you made the comment about, like, say a designer goes and makes a change. I guess my question is how does that not just like blow everything you've already built, or how does that work together so that you can?
Yeah. So kind of like I'll show this this example here. I'm going to switch back into a maybe the simpler scheme, the presentational scheme first. Where is my cursor? Okay. And I'll have the app running on the right. So this is, my to-do app component, right? This is kind of how it starts out initially. And you're able to change anything in here. You can, like I was mentioning before, you can add states, right? But you can pass these in as props onto these various elements of the to-do app component. So one of the elements of the to-do app component, for instance, was this. Let me go back to my to-do app project here. And I think it was this one. And in this, one of these elements, for instance, was, so you've got the root element here, but also like another element that's like what we called the task list element. And, you can create whatever elements you want. Maybe we'll call this one the title element. And basically, you can reference any of these elements in the through this component interface. And, like task list is something that if you want to override it with whatever on-click handler that you want, any contents that you want, like that, you have a lot of flexibility in terms of, if I want it to have a certain style or class name or anything really. So you can override all these things. And, next time I run Plasmic Sync, it's not, in this scheme, it's not, touching this file at all. So it's just regenerating the Plasmic to-do app component, the presentational component. So you have a lot of flexibility in terms of like overriding any of these things. Fancier things you can do, just to ship you, like you can like wrap things in, like I'm gonna wrap this in my, some higher order component you have, like my observer component, for instance, or replace the whole component with something entirely different. My Google Maps component. I mean, you can take this whole function and just like return my real to-do app, or whatever. You don't even have to render the Plasmic app, the Plasmic generated component. at all.
All right, next question is, can you build React Native components?
Yeah, so, or no, you cannot build React Native components right now. This is something that comes up a lot, and so definitely like hope not too distant future we can start tackling this, but want to earn the right to work on those problems first, and so just focusing on React for now.
Okay. Another question says, can we do this again at 1 speed? Will there be a fee?
Sorry, I was just trying to be respectful of people's time, but yeah, I'm you know, very happy to give tours of the app and dive into any aspect in more detail. We actually have this kind of learning center where this might be more relevant. But basically, you know, a bunch of resources for learning things. Like we have this series of video tutorials, for instance, where you can kind of explore written guides for like the studio itself and how to navigate it, and a bunch of example projects that you can kind of play with. And of course, the meat of things is our developer guides, developer tutorials, and we generally try to keep our, you know, our roadmap and updates, our changelog up to date. So yeah, you can feel free to explore in here as well. But I'm also, you know, it's really early for us, and so we're very happy to spend time with users, and you know, really all we're looking for, all we're asking for is just your willingness to engage us with feedback. So yeah, I mean, the tool itself is like free, and you know, it's going to be kept free for individual users and small teams. So
the next question is, I think you covered free, but the next one is,
yeah,
not sure if this is covered. How long did it take to create this tool with how big of a team?
Yeah, so started on this a little under a year ago, and it was with, I mean, now the team is, so there's 4 other people on the team, and but that was probably starting like late last year. Yeah, so the team size changed over time.
Okay. Next question is, can you create your custom wrapper components around native components such as view or text, and then use them as placeholders?
Can you create your custom wrapper components around native components? Yeah. Yeah, that is really interesting. We haven't really explored trying to make this work, but that actually is a really simple approach that could possibly work. So I think specifically, like you can basically create, you know, I can create a component here called called a text component. Maybe I'll create this into a text component, and then I'll create another one called my, you know, view component. And then basically at codegen time, you know, you get this text component generated, you get this view component generated, and you can actually just, you know, we can do it. And so, you know, you get the text, you get the view, and then from there, you can actually edit the text component to use the, you know, your real native text, oops, whatever, native text component, etc. Yeah, and I guess that's a really great suggestion.
Okay. Next question is, where's the file saved when you click the React symbol?
The React symbol, all that does is, it's the same thing as when I right-click a component or an element and I say create a component out of it. That's all this React symbol does. So you're just, you know, extracting components. It's like a refactoring operation. But, you know, every change you're making is constantly being saved, just live. So, you know, every time you see a little dot up here, that means it's saving. So anyway.
All right, excellent. For this particular, Plasmic app, I just wanted to ask some questions on my side too. Are you using WebAssembly in any way to like develop this tool?
No, we actually are deliberately trying to not do that, and trying to keep everything like bare bones DOM and CSS, and embracing the web platform. And this is for two reasons. One is having a tool that lets you craft in the medium removes a lot of these kind of more existential questions about like what am I really creating? Like, is this going to translate? Is this going to be feasible on a target platform? That like all the questions that you have to deal with when you're importing from Figma, or like translating Figma designs. So just like keeping ourselves honest in that regard. And then the second reason is so you can actually use your real code components in the canvas. Like if you are already using Material UI or your own component library or something like Ant Design, or any one of these like real existing React components, you should be able to just like drop them in and see it work. And this is not something that we have yet. This is something that we're currently working on. But hosting your own components is definitely like basically the main thing we're working on right now.
So this tool is mainly built in React then, JavaScript?
Yeah, exactly. The whole thing is a React app. And so that's what I was talking about with respect to like the state management and worrying about latency and scalability. It's all about like, like how do you like, in this case, how do you wrangle, your MobX to get you some of the things that you might want out of like, breaking up changes to happen as concurrently as possible. And so each of these actually, for instance, each of these artboards on the canvas is its own iframe. Each of these is its own separate React app running within this larger React app, which is the studio itself. So like, here's a React app, here's a React app, here's a React app, here's a React app, for instance.
Gotcha. All right. It's really interesting and fascinating technology. I've never seen anything like this. So hats off to you for making something so excellent.
Thank you for the kind words. It's a lot of fun to work on. And we're all the credit really goes to this amazing team that I work with. But I mean, the main fun part about it is just seeing what people create with the tool. So definitely very eager to see that.
Do you have time for a few more questions?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So one more is from Frederick. He says, does it use Flexbox for layout?
Yeah, it does. These kind of controls. So the main container types that I would call attention to, one is just like a freeform box. Like when I'll create a new artboard just to show what I mean. But basically, I can insert a box onto the screen. I can also insert a horizontal stack onto the screen and also a vertical stack on the screen. And these are all, we try to make it really easy to switch the type of an element to, if it's a div, an A, an H1, etc. But like when you have a freeform box, you can just draw things within it arbitrarily. Just absolutely positions. If you have a stack, then everything you put in it is like actually arranged vertically. Sorry, this is a horizontal stack that I dropped in. So basically you have a bunch of these boxes that you can let's say spread out like so, and same thing with vertical stacks. So these are in fact Flexbox, but like our own spin on things. So this is like the column gap here. This is a polyfill for the forthcoming W3C sort of gap for Flexbox, which is landing, I think, soon in Chrome, if not already. But it's going to take time for that to get to other browsers. I know Firefox has had it for a while. Yeah. And then on native, you have things like Yoga and the newer Stretch layout engines, which try to adhere to Flexbox generally. So Flexbox is stack. We actually also have a grid container, which is that's CSS grid, which is also really awesome.
All right. We got a few more questions here. Where can I find the codes for Plasmic generated? And then how do I drop in a carousel?
So the generated code, so you can really easily see that just by spinning up a sandbox and kind of, you can just browse the code from there. This is actually really nice because it lets you also just play with the code and edit it. So like I showed you in the terminal, all the same components are being generated here. It's the exact same thing as what you get when you're using the CLI to sync down to a local code base. So you can definitely, just browse the code that way. Same thing with if you just want to see what the CSS looks like, etc. This is all the stuff that you don't have to worry about. Now, the other aspect is, I think you mentioned, oh, sorry, this is somebody else. How do you drop in a carousel? So if, I'm assuming you're not asking about a component that you built in Plasmic, but an existing component that is from outside of Plasmic that you want to drop in. So this is what I was referring to with code components. This is the thing we're working on right now, which is letting you import your, whether it's some NPM library like Material UI or your own library of components, like if you have your own carousel, just being able to drop in an instance of that and then actually, customize its props, etc., from the right-hand panel and style it the way you want. So, but yeah, I mean, the alternative is, you can always create things in here as well.
One more question says, how long will the registration be open?
I'll keep it open all tonight. And I think if, definitely I just want to welcome everyone here to play with it. Yeah, usually we keep it closed just for our own sanity and because we're not ready.
Okay. All right, I think we got through all the questions. I'm just gonna put a last call here for questions. We probably have a few more minutes. I'll put, so if you wanna get a question asked, go ahead and ask, or you can type in the chat.
These are great questions. And this is always my favorite part of the talk.
Just one quick question.
Yes, please.
How about testing those components?
So testing the components, we don't do anything special there. If you want to, usually I think the interesting part of testing is either unit testing your component behavior or integration testing, end-to-end testing. And so yeah, we don't really dictate what testing approach you should use, etc. All the behavior is stuff that you would be adding as your own code, in these proper components, for instance, for the presentational code gen scheme. So yeah, basically we try not to touch that. I think if you're more interested in the storybook flavor of getting components onto a screen, this is actually stuff that would be very easy for us to do, is to generate storybook stories for you, so you can just see them in all of the different variants, etc. Yeah.
All right. I think that was pretty much it. The only other feedback we got was very impressive. And yeah, definitely I feel the same way too, very impressive. Yeah, again, like I said, I've never quite like this, but it makes it it's easier to develop, your own application, this kind of does a lot of the React scaffolding for you. You don't have to think about it as much. So that's actually pretty impressive given how long it does take to sort of put together a React app in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, that's really our goal, is to try and make it fun to craft these things.
Yeah, kind of give the designers some power back, from
that too. Yeah. So besides developers, if we can invite designers and create a more inclusive end-to-end workflow, that's definitely something we're very excited about exploring.
Somebody wants you to drop in that registration link on
the yes. So I'll type it right here.
Okay. And while he's doing that, I just want to make sure everybody knows about our website, again, JavaScriptLA.net. I'll also drop that into the chat. So just for those of you who came in kind of late, you might have missed the beginning. Usually we do network, and we sort of like give everybody a chance to kind of talk about who they are, where they're from, what they're interested in learning. And then this group meets pretty much, we typically do once a month, but it feels like sometimes we actually do more than once a month. We have meetups, and that's just, if we get more people who are interested in giving talks, then we'll accommodate that. So most of our talks are on Zoom. And so if you want to find out about the next meetup, you would go to this website, JavaScriptLA.net. It's all typed out. You don't want to type in JSLA or something else, because that will actually link you to a whole bunch of other different websites. So spell it out, JavaScriptLA.net. And then basically, yeah, like I said, we have a meetup probably every few weeks now. And all of these meetups, including this one today, will be on youtube.com/JavaScriptLA. So we do record all meetups, and then we do post them to our YouTube channel. So if you did want to, watch this again at 1 speed or even 2 speed, you can. That's totally something you can do. And then, the only other thing I would say is make sure you're on the mailing list, so that way you don't miss new meetup announcements. And you can do that from our website again at javascriptla.net. When you click the link, you'll just see, like, on the right-hand side, mailbox, sign me up. You can also join our Discord channel. That gives you a chance to network with everybody here if you didn't get a chance to actually talk to them, during the chat time or during the beginning where we have a little bit of networking time. So with that, I want to just sort of give everybody like a few minutes to close it out. If you have any last questions, you can ask them now. If not, then no problem. We'll see you either on Discord or the next meetup. Okay, so then Yang, any final thoughts?
No, thank you so much for pulling this together and organizing, and just the opportunity to share this. Yeah, it's been really fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. And hope to have you back, and feel free to also, I think I added you on LinkedIn, so just feel free to respond if you have time.
Awesome.
Have other questions for you about Plasmic itself. So good presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Have a good night, everyone. Bye.
Good night.